Connecting with purpose is about doing what matters most in a time when our families, workplaces, and communities need us. This show from Purpose Views presents honest conversations about what's possible when we invest in helping our people be their best, purposeful selves. You'll hear the challenges of making those investments and tips for reaping their rewards. This show is designed to help people-first leaders like you create the impact you seek. Let me introduce you to the purpose-driven and real-talking hosts, Mark, Neil, and Nell.
Hello, Mark. It is great to be here with you today. I'm Nell Debevoise of Purpose Fused for an episode in our second season of Connecting with Purpose. Thrilled to be joined by Mark Atkinson, who is the CEO of Mursion, a very, very cool and fascinating company that is a VR training platform to help people practice and master workplace skills. And Mark comes to that work from a lifetime of really impactful education and workplace entrepreneurship. So welcome, Mark. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So by way of intro, I would love it if you would just share your individual purpose and why you wanted to have this conversation with me today.
First of all, I wanted to have the conversation because I really appreciate the writing and thinking you've done on this subject and more broadly around the future of work and how it impacts all of us and all of our lives. And in some ways, that fascination is very much at the heart of my own sense of purpose. By way of my own background, I studied the sort of historical origins of labor and economics when I was a college student and did a lot of work around just the whole idea through history of the dignity of work and how it shows up in our politics and in our culture and in our economics. And I would say probably most of my adult life has traversed both as a practitioner, as a political organizer, as a journalist, and now as an entrepreneur, issues related to work, the dignity that work gives us, and the efforts that we all have to become somewhat self-actualized through the work that we do.
So elegant. I love that. And I think dignity is such a worthy reason to do this work, and is a great segue into where we like to start, which is around calling BS on something. There's so much talk about purpose these days. And I think only the highest and best forms have that link to real dignity. So I would love to hear what's something that you see companies or employers doing around individual purpose that you wish they wouldn't, or that you'd like to call BS on.
I think that we have perhaps trivialized the cultural aspects of what draws people to their workplace, to their work colleagues, and their work mission by virtue of creating sort of thinking that by creating modest creature comforts, we can entrap people to basically be economic slaves to a function that does not develop and grow them into their full potential. And I'm not, obviously, look, I'm all for giving lunches to people and offering sort of conveniences to get to the office. And I think those things are important, but I think they become part of an idea that I think we think a lot about here, which is the work becoming a place around which you grow as a human being and develop both skills and relationships that not only empower, and as I used the term before, sort of self-actualize you in the workplace, but they translate it to your real life as well. They give you a sense of identity and purpose and agency that gives you confidence and voice that translates into a number of other things that you do. And so I think it's hard to get the substance of that right. If I were to call BS on anything, I don't think you can buy it by virtue of a free lunch, basically.
Yeah. So on point. I love that sentiment and share it deeply. And I think we're seeing it crumble, right? There was kind of I saw an article somewhere not too long ago of that we've reached peak perks. And it doesn't hold. So I think that's an astute observation. And another great segue into what does work. And I know you all, you personally care so much, and so through your leadership, Mursion invests so deeply and thoughtfully in people, specifically people's, purpose toward that self-actualization. Tell us about a practice or an approach that you're really proud of.
So I would say in organizational design, creating functions that give people the opportunity to grow into larger responsibilities, and in a way, staging growth at a pace around which they can responsibly develop the talents and skills to be successful, and providing the supports for them to do so. This is hard, I think, at all stages of organizations. It is particularly hard in startups that are so hardwired to go fast that they sometimes reward speed over success. And I think by the way, I don't think this is easy, and so I don't come to you suggesting that I think that we have figured it out. I think in some cases we've had to pause, go slower, and look at the degree to which we are developing each. I mean, in every organization, your core functions are interdependent on one another, and their ability to collaborate and problem solve and listen to one another is what ultimately defines success. And the people that you put in leadership roles in those organizations have to be given the tools, resources, and personnel to do that. And they have to be able to, for their personnel, do the same thing that I'm just sort of describing for a leadership team. And there's a rate of growth around which you can do that really well, particularly when you're trying an ambitious new idea, as we are, that you just have to take stock of. Like, I think getting it right and making it clear, and giving people the supports they need to get it right and make it clear so that they can become winners in the organization. I think, and that takes a level of discipline. It certainly takes a lot of work, but it also takes a level of patience that you have to be willing to employ to make them successful. Because if they're successful, we're all going to be successful. And I think there's a tendency. I mean, look, you're seeing it across the economy right now, of people who were so focused on hypergrowth and so focused on bringing lots and lots and lots of people in and throwing people at problems rather than actually solving the way that they're going to attack those problems, that the entire economy is taking a step back right now. And that's a painful correction for everyone to go through. So I think it's about, I mean, really, I think it's about putting people in the right roles and giving them the right supports and the right tools to be successful.
Love that. So well put. And again, yeah, the micro in a team, right, or in an organization, but then we see it reflected in the macro, I think, especially right now. So that's pointy. How does people's individual purpose inform that growth?
So I think that people expect to come to work and develop talents and skills that they have not yet had the opportunity to explore. And there's something about stretching, showing them what that looks like, encouraging them to take the risks to get there, knowing full well that they're going to slip back and make mistakes, and and still encouraging there and providing the support so that that failure is a learning experience, not a debilitating experience. That a culture that encourages people to take risks and therefore gives people voice to actually be heard in the organization around ideas that may not be the conventional wisdom. Leaders that are rewarded, incentivized, and supported to listen to all voices. And so that truly the best idea on the table at any given time wins, even if it's not the way you've been doing things in the past. Those kinds of cultural norms, I think, make people feel like coming to work is an opportunity to accelerate their own growth and development. And that feeling like you're on that path, I think, does create the circumstances around which this kind of dignity and pride, and I think your best performance actually all come out.
Yeah, totally. Totally. I think this is one of those things that's kind of like, if you know a little bit or something, right? Like once you've seen it in action, it's such an obvious upward spiral, right? Because it really does happen. And yet, we could dig into your earlier academic work and another conversation of the history of work and what it's looked like, right, in the Industrial Revolution, and now this fourth revolution that we're in, and then the more recent tumults of COVID, and now downturn. There's lots there. Are there any kind of really specific tactical things that you're able to share that you all do or have learned to do at Mursion to get at that? Because I think it can sound like pie in the sky to some folks who aren't there yet.
Well, I mean, it's aspirational for all of us. I would say that's absolutely true. So I think that some of this is made possible by identifying people who are going to actually come with a vision that they want to try to take a functional area of the business from some place where they see it today to some place where it can be. So some of that is just the one thing I want to be really clear about this is still, every enterprise tries to find the very best person they can find for every single role that they can find it. I do think there's a lot to be said about broadening your aperture and looking in as many areas of society that you can tap for those expertise, not just your own personal networks, but identifying people that bring different perspectives to this kind of work. If you're leading a purpose sort of oriented business, the way Mursion is, you tend to attract people that are really interested in that purpose. And you want people, though, who actually are come in with some understanding of what it takes to do that, and then some path that you want to try to grow them on. And then I do think it is about setting ambitious goals for people, holding yourself. I mean, organizations have all these things that they say, we're going to give feedback, we're going to go through this process, but building a culture that says that not only are we going to have a process by which we give people feedback, but we're going to own the responsibility for getting them from one level to another level and make promises to them that we're going to honor as leaders and hold ourselves accountable if we don't do that. Those things are, I think you work at them all the time. And I mean, it's one of the areas around which actually we work with our clients. We find that clients are extremely good about building cultures where managers eventually learn how to give feedback downward. We find a lot of organizations struggle to build culture where managers expect feedback up to them. And I'd be lying to you if I said that we don't try to, we all wrestle with those same sets of issues internally. Like we have to sort of take our own medicine around the same things that we're expecting our customers to work on, and practice them with the same tools that we use when we work with our customers, to be perfectly honest with you. So I think a lot of those things are, they are both pie in the sky, and will always be pie in the sky. That's the nature of it. This is aspirational work. Like it's like child rearing or anything else. Like you can read a lot of books on it and you're still going to make a lot of mistakes along the way.
Of that. What amongst those mistakes, I know there have been wins for you too. Is there an example of just for you that purpose that you talked about of making work an exercise in or a source of dignity for people? Is there something that you can remember maybe with your leadership team or someone that you hired that fell into that category for you?
Yes, I think some of the most delightful moments are when you find people who kind of have skills and experiences that are somewhat orthogonal to the group, but because they bring a different perspective on the work, that they change the direction in which the business is heading, because I do think there is this tendency to get towards groupthink and I have, in my own experience, interacted with a lot of folks that have worked around the learning that is designed for students. And of course, Mursion is very focused on the learning that occurs for adults.
Mm.
And what's funny is a lot of the people that come out of that sort of early education world have this kind of almost envy of the corporate landscape, thinking, well, at all of these giant organizations, they're so much more sophisticated around the science of learning and the development of people. And if we could only emulate the brilliance of the
Mm.
top companies in America, our lowly small school would be that much better. And I've actually thought that the opposite is true in a lot of places, that in some ways, the innocence around which and the transparency around which a lot of people have thought about early childhood development
Mhm.
um, would benefit a lot of the largest organizations that still seem to have people that have developmentally not got past early childhood in terms of the way they act out in the workplace. And there's a lot to be said for reminding people that sharing, giving voice, turn taking, and listening are skills that actually are as relevant to adulthood as they are to early childhood.
Yeah. Yeah, love that. I know the grass is always greener, right? But I think you're spot on. Corporate learning is often not so enlightened or intentional, I think your word. So shifting then to that kind of aspirational nature of this means that there's always growth edges. What's something kind of top of mind, again, knowing that you are in that growth stage as a startup? What's kind of, if we talk again a year from now, what's one thing with regard to this dignity giving, purpose investing for your employees? Where would you like to be in the next year?
So I'm going to give you two answers to that question. I'm going to give you one that's a sort of for us, a way we think about our business and our marketplace. And I'll give you one that is an internal examination of that.
Mhm.
Um, we believe that we're all about how do you develop, nurture, and measure behavior change. And in that sense, we support all kinds of organizations that care about the growth of their leaders. That's a lovely, again, as you used to use your phrase, kind of pie in the sky thing. But there are organizations um, where talent development is the lever around which they see the business objectives that they have being met, whether those are innovation goals, productivity goals, or growth goals.
Mm.
They don't believe that it's a financial engineering trick or simply a process improvement to get to those business objectives. It is about growing the skills and talents of the leaders and staff that they have today. Those are the people that we want to work with. And there are a lot of people for whom those kinds of skills are a kind of an employee benefit that looks good on a brochure. And for us as a business, learning to really know the difference is a huge, huge, huge challenge, to be perfectly honest with you, because some people project a pretty good brochure and you've got to really kick the tires to see how their culture
Yeah.
plays out within them. And then for us, I think if I were to say, so for us, we will come back to you and I'll actually, you'll ask me a year from now tell me the three or four things you ask a customer that tells you whether or not they're on path A or path B,
Mm.
and therefore whether they're the right group for you to work with versus not. For us as an organization, we are starting to see people that are really, really committed to some of the values you've heard me talking about, knocking on the door saying, this is a place around which I can grow as a person who leads in this work because I've been doing this in a different context. Maybe in one of these organizations, there are a lot of nonprofits doing some really exciting work around innovation, around talent development. And in order to get more scale and impact, I am attracted to this and come with ideas around which I want to drive your business forward. I want to be a place that is a magnet for those kinds of people and sees their ability to actually accomplish their goals through us. Because I do think that is what starts to create a flywheel of real energy and enthusiasm and innovation in the organization. And I think we are starting to see that now in exciting ways where folks that are just have been in the workplace, have been in what I think of as a very dynamic marketplace for talent development that is emerging both in nonprofits, in existing organizations, and in some school programs that where people are coming out saying there is actually a way to create processes internal to organizations that reward people. They think compensation differently, they think staffing and scheduling differently, they think assignments differently. They actually, the workplace in their mind will mimic some of the good things that they see about their academic experience, about when do we come together, when do we work virtually, what is the role of the leader, how, to what extent do we as students, and in their case, but as junior employees, actually have leadership authority to take agency over projects that we simply own ourselves and report up. Those structures, if you compare them to the sort of command and control models that many of our generation, or certainly my generation, grew up in, they're radically different and much more innovative and spontaneous and I think rewarding. That energy that we seek, I think, coming up with the new generation that's graduating is a very exciting energy that we want to harness. And hopefully a year from now, I can tell you how we're doing that.
Cool. I love it. What are the first things that you're trying, knowing you're trying to get there? Are there kind of initiatives or approaches that you hope will get you there?
Yeah, there is a movement afoot right now that a number of organizations are taking, where they really are rethinking what they would call the sort of efforts around capability building within the organization. And you'll meet people that will say, we have an addiction to hiring our way out of every problem that we face, when we could in fact grow our talent so that we solve every problem that we face, excuse me. And that mentality, whether it's being brought into the organization by an outside consulting practice, because there are a number of consulting practices that really focus on giving organizations the tools, processes, and sort of insights to think this way, or you see it sort of bubbling up within organizations, particularly now at a time when there's still even in a challenging economy, there's such a competitive marketplace for certain kinds of talents, and so the only way to get the talent is to grow it. And there's this realization that the skills we need are changing so quickly that you just can't swap out people all the time. You have to build a culture that develops those skills in the workplace. So how do we embed that? I mean, the number of organizations that are launching academies, or things they're calling universities, or internal structures where people would assume that they're being upskilled and reskilled and developing a range of talents that they didn't have the day they started. That's a very exciting sort of place to be living right now. And I think it holds a lot of promise for the future.
Yeah. And I know it's not our topic for today, but just having done the demo, Mursion is such a powerful, scalable, efficient tool to do some of that skill building, right? I mean, it's what you all exist for.
Well, I would say this, that we thought through the commoditization of knowledge. Like the internet and any number of derivative products from the internet have taught us that like all knowledge is out there. So now the question is structuring the right information for people that want it in the right circumstance in the most convenient way, because there's only so much we can all be retaining. But then we need other tools to actually develop mastery of the skills so we know what to do with that knowledge. And the beauty of simulation, and I think simulation is an element of learning that we have known from the beginning of time when it happens, well to us, when we experience it well, that can be enormously powerful, because part of the reason why we fail at work and in life is having to do with stress and, to some degree, a certain amount of judgmental bias or limitations. That if I actually know something, there are moments when I will forget it and revert back to something I thought was true of the person I was interacting with, not the problem. I could no longer see the problem I was solving. It was the person that got me in the way of actually being my best self to make the thing that I wanted to have happen. And I think that simulation is by far the most powerful way for people to overcome those limitations, to develop those muscles, and to basically be sufficiently present in every interaction they're having with a colleague or a customer, to make sure they do use the knowledge that they've had access to in any training that anybody else has done. And obviously immersion's a good way to do that. So yes.
Yeah. And to stay in line, I mean, how we would put it is to stay in line with their purpose, right? It's one thing to do the discovery, which is a real process of discovering what is my best self. And so just that is a big threshold and a lifelong process, an aspirational process, on the individual level. But then staying in that amid the swirl and the overwhelm and the change and the busyness of life and work is not easy. So it's powerful to get to practice in that very real way.
Agree.
What to close before going all the different routes that we could with this, but just tell me again, back to circling full circle to you and yourself and your purpose around work and the dignity it can bring. What's a form of legacy or impact that you would like to see in your wake?
I think of it as a leader. I would like to believe I created a culture and a team that wanted to be together long after I was there. That the values associated with the work that they were doing were values that were empowering and values that were sustaining, and that the relationships that they built were relationships that were important enough that for as long as they had the energy and ambition to do work, they wanted to continue to do work together. You want people to grow, and you want this to be life-changing. And a lot of the work that the relationships you build over work are huge. Next to your family, they're some of the most important relationships you develop in life. And it would be my great honor if that turned out to be the outcome of the work I was doing.
So beautiful. I love that, I think we're so, especially as purpose-driven entrepreneurs, there's the output, right? Or the impact that we're having externally. And so often that can lead to a neglect of, or an oversight of, or even a sacrificing of the internal piece, right? And you're so right. I mean, that those internal hours, so many of us spend more time with colleagues than with even our closest family these days. So totally. To have those be, transformational relationships, what a powerful thing. So fabulous aspirational note to end on. Thank you again for your work. And I look forward to hearing those screening questions that you've come up with a year from now and watching Mursion's growth.
Thank you, Nell, and thank you for your wisdom and your excellent questions and just your leadership in this whole area. So thank you.
Cheers, Mark. More soon.
Take care.
We're energized about this journey and hope you choose to join us. Click the subscribe button now so you don't miss out on all the actionable wisdom to come.